When it comes to traveling in Africa, the same destinations almost always come up. Egypt with its pyramids, Morocco with its colorful souks, South Africa with safaris and wine. But there is a country there, right in the north of the continent, that almost never makes it onto these itineraries. Algeria. And not only does it deserve to be included, it should be at the top of the list. We are talking about the largest country in Africa, a place that combines the Sahara, the ruins of the Roman Empire, cities buried by sand, and traditions and rituals so ancient that they will surprise you if you think you've seen it all. Just wait until you get to know Algeria. Today, Bello Mundo takes you on a journey through the dunes, mountains, ghost towns, and bustling markets of this forgotten giant of Africa. Number 1. Location and general information. If you open a world map now, you'll notice Algeria in North Africa, bordering the Mediterranean Sea, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Mali, and a bunch of other countries. But what few people realize is that Algeria is the largest country on the African continent. Yes, the largest. What's more, it is among the 10 largest countries in the world in terms of land area. It covers more than 2,300,000 square kilometers. This puts Algeria ahead of countries such as Greenland, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia. It is land that never ends. But there is one detail that changes everything. About 80% of this immensity is pure desert. And not just any desert. It is the Sahara, the largest and most unforgiving on the planet, meaning that Algeria is literally an ocean of sand. A territory where the wind moves dunes as if they were waves, where villages disappear from the map and reappear years later. Most of the population lives in the north, near the coast, in cities such as Algiers, Oran, and Constantine. This is where the climate is milder, where there is water, commerce, and a little vegetation. Now, move down the map. The temperature rises, the green disappears, and everything turns to stone, dust, and silence. But that doesn't mean it doesn't surprise, because here the desert has a lot of buried history, literally. Number 2. Historic sites. Within this silence of the Sahara, there are cities that look like mirages. There, in the middle of the desert, for example, is Timimoun, a city that seems to have sprung from the sand. The houses have the same reddish tone as the soil, made of ochre clay, as if they had been carved directly from the dunes. And the most curious thing? All of this survives thanks to an ancient irrigation system called Fogara, which has channeled groundwater since medieval times. In the middle of the desert, they learned to grow shade, palm trees, and even crops. Heading north, almost touching the Mediterranean, comes another shock. Constantine, one of the oldest cities in the world, still inhabited. But it's not just its age that impresses. It was built on top of a deep canyon, with towering bridges connecting the two sides. It's one of those landscapes that looks like a montage. But it's real. Literally, a city suspended in the air. And the best is yet to come. In the center of Algeria are the remains of Timgad, an entire Roman city abandoned in the middle of nowhere. Straight streets, standing columns, remains of thermal baths, a library, mosaics on the floor. Everything is still there, as if time had forgotten to destroy it. And if these places already seem incredible, wait until you see what nature has in store there, because the unbelievable landscapes in Algeria are beyond belief. Number 3. Nature. Starting in the south. There, where the desert becomes almost another world, is the Hogar, a mountainous territory with black, pointed formations, as if the ground had exploded and frozen in time. During the day, the heat is brutal. At night, the cold is punishing. And between one extreme and the other, you feel like you've left Earth. At the heart of this immensity is the Core, with its twisted, isolated stone towers defying the clear sky. One of the most iconic spots is Asacrem, a sacred peak where missionary Charles de Foucauld took refuge. From there, you can see the most surreal sunrise in the Sahara, an explosion of orange tones on top of black rocks. It's almost spiritual. Further east, another hidden gem, the Tassili Najer Desert. But there, instead of endless sand, what impresses are the rock walls covered with rock art. There are more than 15,000 paintings and engravings made up to 12,000 years ago by peoples who lived when the Sahara was still a savanna. And the most bizarre thing, there are drawings of giraffes, elephants, oxen, crocodiles, everything that today seems impossible to exist there. It's as if the landscape itself is screaming that it was once very different. And speaking of fauna, yes, there is animal life there. Algeria is home to species that you would only expect to see in a documentary. There is the fennec fox, a tiny fox with huge ears, symbol of the desert. There are gazelles, wild boars, mongooses, chameleons, and even migratory birds that use the oases as a resting place. But if there is one animal that defines the soul of the Algerian desert, it is the camel. Number 4. The cavalry that has no horses. While the rest of the world rode horses in green fields, here in the middle of the Sahara, a troop emerged that preferred camels. Yes, Algeria had and still has a cavalry mounted on dromedaries. During the French colonial period, the army created the Compagnie Méariste Saharienne, a special patrol unit trained to cross the vastness of the desert on single-humped camels. These soldiers, known as Méaristes, were trained to survive in extreme heat, sleep under the stars, and navigate only by the stars. They were practically ghosts of the Sahara, agile, silent, ready for anything. Their uniform combined traditional turbans with French military insignia, a unique image. But the most impressive thing, this tradition did not end with independence. To this day, Algeria maintains a military unit mounted on dromedaries, mainly in the border regions with Mali and Niger. There, where no jeep can survive and where GPS fails, the camel remains undefeated. And so do the soldiers. Now that you know where the country is located, its historical sites, and have met Africa's most exotic army, it's time to understand the essence of the country, and for that we need to talk about history. Number 5. History. Long before the French, the Arabs, and even the Romans, this land was already occupied by peoples called Berbers, the true natives of North Africa. They have been there for millennia, adapted to the mountains, the desert, and the coast. They created kingdoms, languages, traditions, and a hard, resilient way of life, shaped by scarcity and time. Then came the Phoenicians, then the Romans, then the Byzantines, the Arabs, the Ottomans. Everyone wanted a piece of Algeria, and it changed its language, its clothing, its religion, but never its soul. Things changed for good in the 19th century when France invaded and turned the country into a colony. And then, the wound began to open. For over 100 years, the French occupied everything. They took land, exploited resources, suppressed local cultures, and treated Algeria as an appendage of Europe. Thousands of French people moved there and began to live like lords, while the Algerians were marginalized. But the people did not remain silent. Over time, several resistance movements emerged. The most important was the creation of the National Liberation Front, known by the acronym FLN, which, in 1954, started the War of Independence. It was one of the most brutal conflicts of the 20th century. 8 years of terror, with attacks, torture, massacres, and fear on all sides. But in 1962, after much bloodshed, Algeria finally gained independence. However, freedom came with open wounds, both physical and emotional. Many people had to flee, many others were left behind, and the country had to reinvent itself from the ruins. To this day, the trauma of colonization is still present. It's in speeches, books, songs, and even street names. Memory has become part of identity, and that shapes what Algeria is today, a proud, resilient country that never forgets. And since we're talking about identity, nothing represents identity as much as the people who live there. Number 6. Population. With so much land, so much history, and so much diversity, you can't expect Algeria to have a homogeneous population. And it doesn't. Today, more than 45 million people live there. But the most curious thing is that even with this large population, most of the territory remains empty. That same strip of desert that occupies more than 80% of the map remains virtually uninhabited. But those who live there carry the weight and pride of millennia. Most Algerians identify as Arab Berber. This is because the Berbers, as we saw earlier, are the original peoples of North Africa, but over the centuries, with the arrival of the Arabs and the Islamization of the region, there was a cultural and identity fusion. There are also groups that keep the Berber language and culture alive independently, such as the Kabyles, the Kawis, and the Tuaregs. The latter, incidentally, are known as the Blue Men of the Desert, because of their clothes dyed with a blue so intense that it even stains their skin. They live mainly in southern Algeria, in nomadic tents, guiding caravans, maintaining traditions, and surviving in the middle of the Sahara. And would you like to know a curious fact? More than half of the Algerian population is under 30 years old. In other words, it is a young country, full of energy, but also with many challenges, mainly in terms of unemployment, access to housing, and opportunities. Even so, Algerians are, above all, proud of their identity. There is a very strong sense of belonging, of valuing one's roots, and of keeping the local culture alive, whatever that may be. And this culture, of course, would not be complete without mentioning two things that define any people: religion and language. Number 7. Religion and languages. Algeria is, first and foremost, a deeply religious country. The overwhelming majority of the population, more than 99%, follows Sunni Islam. And it's not just a spiritual matter. The Muslim faith is present in practically everything, from the calendar to the laws, from customs to architecture. Calls to prayer echo through cities 5 times a day, and the month of Ramadan completely changes the rhythm of the country, with shops closing early, fasting during the day, and large celebrations at night. But there are also differences. In the south of the country, for example, there are Tuareg communities that practice Islam with their own rituals, often blending local traditions with religious precepts. And although Christianity and Judaism are present in a very small way, they have an important past, especially in Roman and French colonial times. Now, when it comes to language, the landscape is as diverse as the territory. Arabic is the official language used in documents, the press, and formal education. But what you hear most on the streets is so-called Algerian Arabic, which is a mixture of Arabic with Berber, French, and even Italian. Yes, it is a true linguistic melting pot. In fact, French is still widely used, even without official status. It appears on signs, in newspapers, in contracts, and even on television programs. It is a direct legacy of the colonial period that still appears in everyday life, especially among older generations and the urban elite. Number 8. Customs and traditions. In Algeria, appearances matter a lot. But we're not talking about vanity, but rather respect and tradition. The way you dress, greet people, speak, everything has a silent code, learned from an early age and respected by all. To begin with, hospitality is sacred. Hosts feel honored to welcome guests. If you visit an Algerian home, even without warning, you are almost certain to be welcomed with tea, dates, and, depending on the occasion, even a full meal. And speaking of tea, it is not just a drink, but a true ritual. There are 3 cups, each with a deep symbolism. The first cup is strong, bitter, almost harsh. It represents life as it is, full of challenges, uncertainties, and stumbles. It is a reminder that nothing comes easy. The second cup is smoother, sweeter, more enveloping. It represents love, bonds, and the joys that soften the journey. And the third cup, this is the lightest of all. It represents death, not as a tragic end, but as an acceptance of the passage, a rest after the journey. Drinking the 3 cups is more than a matter of etiquette. It is an act of respect, communion, and trust. Refusing any one of them can be seen as a sign of distrust or discourtesy. And there's an interesting detail. Men usually prepare tea in more traditional homes. It's almost a role of honor, as if it were an art they have mastered. A slow, meticulous preparation with just the right amount of foam. A sign of respect for the guest. Now, if these customs already catch your attention, wait until you learn about the festivals and rituals that enliven the Algerian calendar. Number 9. Traditions, festivals, and rituals. If we told you that there are festivals in Algeria that began before the Roman Empire even existed, would you believe us? Well, it's true. There, tradition is not just a pretty word. It's a way of life, a living timeline, a memory that dances and sings. One of the country's most emblematic festivals is Yenayer, the Berber New Year, celebrated by Kabyle, Chaoui, Tuareg, and other Amazigh communities. It marks the arrival of a new agricultural cycle. And there's no champagne or fireworks here. The year begins with couscous, dates, chicken, lamb, and stories around the campfire. During the celebrations, families prepare hearty meals, wear traditional clothes, and in some regions paint their children's faces to ward off evil spirits and attract blessings. Another ancient tradition takes place in the Ore Mountains, the Bou Saïdia ritual, in which men dressed in masks and colorful clothes walk through the villages dancing and asking for offerings, all to the sound of drums and flutes. And remember we mentioned earlier the Tuaregs, those desert people in blue clothes? They hold an event called La Sebiba in the city of Janet. It is a ritual dance that celebrates peace between tribes that were once at war. The dancers, men and women, wear symbolic swords and heavy necklaces and move in a circle to a hypnotic rhythm. It is so striking that it has been recognized as intangible cultural heritage of humanity by UNESCO. In rural areas, weddings and funerals are also grand ceremonies filled with traditional music, such as a helil, sung by the Zenite people of the desert. It is a sequence of mystical poems sung in a group, with rhythmic repetition and a deep melody, a sound that gives you goosebumps. And when it comes to weddings, etiquette becomes a spectacle. Algerian weddings are collective celebrations where the union of the couple is almost a backdrop for the party that involves families, friends, neighbors, and sometimes even the entire neighborhood. Depending on the region, the celebration can last from 3 to 7 days. That's right, 7 days of partying. Among the Kabyle and Tuareg peoples, for example, one of the most beautiful rituals is the henna night. The bride, surrounded by women from her family, has her hands and feet decorated with designs full of meaning: fertility, protection, prosperity. Meanwhile, there are traditional dances, ancient songs, and endless banquets. In some rural areas, the dowry is still negotiated between families, and couples start their life together living with the groom's parents, a practice that has changed in large cities but still survives in the countryside. And if all this diversity hasn't impressed you yet, prepare your stomach. Number 10. Gastronomy. With so much history, a mix of peoples and ancient traditions, did you really think Algerian cuisine would be simple? Just as tea has a whole ritual, food also follows codes, rules, and of course, has a lot of flavor. The most famous dish is couscous. Here, it is made with wheat semolina and can be served in 1,000 different ways, with lamb, cooked vegetables, chickpeas, peppers, raisins, almonds. And there is no shortage of variety. Here you have sweet couscous, savory couscous, festive couscous, morning couscous, celebration couscous. Each occasion has its own version. And here's something curious. In many Algerian homes, couscous is still prepared by hand, with the women of the house gathered together, rolling the semolina in clay bowls, in a kind of culinary dance passed down from generation to generation. Another classic dish is chorba, a hearty soup made with meat, tomatoes, grains, and herbs, a guaranteed presence on Ramadan nights. And all of this is served communally, because deep down, food is just another way to reinforce what we already understand about Algeria. Here, everything revolves around community, respect, and cultural heritage. Now, do you understand why everyone should put Algeria on their itinerary? Then comment below on what surprised you most and whether you already knew about this forgotten giant of North Africa. And of course, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and share this video with that friend who loves different cultures. Here at Bello Mundo, we'll continue to take you on a journey without leaving your seat, always with lots of history, interesting facts, and soul. See you at the next destination.